thought that we would be reducing the national debt and all of that. And if you look at the history, it's under Democratic presidents that the national debt has been reduced. The deficit greatly reduced under President Biden. Check that out. And
now, I can't believe this is happening. State lawmakers across the country want this done. Officials are now moving forward with new stimulus payments, and these checks are aimed at providing necessary relief to the millions of low-income households. So make sure to keep on watching this video to get the most up-to-date, reliable stimulus check information. First of all, folks, the Alabama lawmakers are eyeing a possible tax rebate as the state sees a budget surplus of more than $2 billion. The legislators will face decisions on what to do next with this rare surplus, including how much to save, how much to spend, and the state budget that funds education has a $3 billion surplus. According to the Legislative Services Agency, the state general fund has a smaller surplus of $350 million. And now one senator who chairs the Senate Education Budget Committee said lawmakers are working with the Alabama governor to create a proposal, and they expect the plan to include rebate checks to taxpayers, along with tax cuts and putting money in reserves. He said that we believe we have enough to send people back to Alabama with stimulus payments. In addition to that, folks, with the economy and inflation, they're struggling, and so this could be a smaller manner of relief to them. He said that lawmakers are considering $500 million in total rebates. The amount sent back to the people would depend on how eligibility is defined, but he said they are looking at a minimum of $200 or even $250 for individuals and $400 or $500 for married couples who file joint returns. The Republican lawmaker said he also expects proposals for tax cuts, but he said it is important for the state to put a significant amount of money into reserves. The Associated Press reported in August that at least 15 states have approved one-time revenues for the surpluses. There have been disagreements among lawmakers on how to use the rare surplus. Fresh from issuing a $300 tax rebate to residents, the Hawaii governor's administration is considering another tax refund this year. But unlike the previous rebate, this one is for the middle class and low income. Even the state budget director said, "We're looking at all types of support and what we can do to the residents of the state, especially those that are within the middle and lower income, to provide them the kind of relief they need." According to state officials, the tax refund could total anywhere from $100 to $300 million. The latter is nearly the same amount approved by lawmakers last year. The refund proposal is part of the Green administration's tax relief plan. It will also include exemptions and credits for food and even vehicle registrations. The tax refunds are an outgrowth of the positive outlook for the Hawaii economy. And so while the U.S. economy is expected to go into recession, people think the state will avoid one. The Department of Revenue already announced that older and disabled people can now apply for rebates on property taxes or rent paid in 2022. The assistance is available through the Property Tax Rent Rebate Program. It has delivered more than $7 billion to eligible people since the program's creation. And now Georgia's giant hill of money also looms over state lawmakers as the session begins next Monday. State government ended the 2022 budget year with $6 billion in surplus cash. Even the Georgia governor has announced plans to spend more than $3 billion of that amount through a combination of one-time tax givebacks, which fellow Republican legislative leaders are signaling support for. But even that bonanza will leave about $3 billion that could be spent, saved, or given away. Even the Senate Appropriations Committee has said that lawmakers are still on broad pause after giving stimulus payments. They're not sure what to do, folks, so hopefully they can finally come to an agreement.
Inflation and prices. We haven't even seen the impact yet of the lockdowns in China and what that'll do to shipping and supply chains. So the first point, I think, is that it's a good moment to have higher cash levels, to be a bit more cautious and prepared for volatility. But I really appreciate Rick and Steve. They're singing from my playbook about what these shifts in the market today mean for longer-term investment, in particular, how you have to invest in resources, metals, mining, and energy.
You know, we had a discussion yesterday with Jeff Curry from Goldman Sachs, who was talking about just that, this idea that you could be at the beginning of a cycle, and he looks at it because they're just capital-constrained sectors. They haven't had enough capital to be able to keep up with demand. Is that your play on this, too?
That's exactly right. I mean, we've been underinvesting in energy for 5 years. You can't just flip a switch and get all that back. Same thing's true in mining. I mean, I love the point about electric vehicles, and this has been a big topic of our recent research. We found that just to to achieve any kind of goals on green technology, EVs or otherwise, would require $150 billion of CapEx investment into mining per year over the next decade. That's double current levels, and that's just for green technology. If you have priorities around resource independence, energy independence, which is becoming much more popular as a policy option because of Russia, Ukraine, US, China, and so on, I mean, that requires even more investment in capacity. There's no way to get that capacity without long-term commodity prices being higher to incentivize the market, to incentivize private actors to make those big, very expensive investments. But here's the good news. I mean, the good news on this is that these companies are profitable, they're efficient, and they're deeply undervalued. When we look at ETFs like XME, our favorite mining and metals ETF, trading at 9 times earnings, or XLE, our energy ETF, trading 12 times earnings, these are vastly underpriced relative to the market average. S&P still trades at 20 times, and if you look at the hope-driven clean energy stocks, these are still trading 35 or 30.
So both Democratic and Republican lawmakers, everybody, are negotiating on Americans receiving universal basic income payments. This is some good news. It has been announced up to $18,000 may be claimed by several people that are experiencing financial difficulties. So if you qualify for this extra stimulus check, be sure to watch this entire video because you definitely don't want to miss out on it. So the past 3 round stimulus checks have been given to people, and more and more Americans. And more Americans are feeling the need for universal basic income. But many lawmakers in certain states and cities are getting used to this idea. Universal basic income is a set of recurring payments that individuals get from the government. These can be paid out every month, several times a year, or just once annually. Now, this is an idea that entrepreneur Andrew Yang, who recently left the Democratic Party, centered his 2020 presidential campaign around. Now, the good news is that states across the country are beginning to implement their own relief plans that include sending out state relief payments. For a while now, Alaska has been giving its citizens checks under the Alaska Permanent Fund. The fund, which has been around since 1982, was designed to provide state residents, citizens, with a portion of state oil revenues. The Sovereign Wealth Fund pays out annual dividends to eligible citizens. To qualify, you must be an Alaska resident for at least a year, and you're not eligible for this if you've been convicted. Last year's payment went out to 643,000 citizens in Alaska. That totaled around $1,200 per person. The highest payout occurred in 2008 when the payment was around $2,000. Now more money is headed into the pockets of thousands of people who live in Chicago. The Chicago City Council yesterday approved a multi-million-dollar budget, which includes hundreds of dollars for thousands of households in the Windy City. This makes it the largest basic income pilot program in the United States. To qualify, individuals must earn less than $35,000 per year. Participants will be chosen by random. That means you can't apply yourself. Now, the money for this plan is provided under Biden's American Rescue Plan. The passage comes a day after LA announced its program to help thousands of families in the city. The Chicago program is meant to relieve the financial burden on families affected by the crisis. Hundreds of thousands of people in Chicago lost their jobs during the first 6 months of the crisis, and about 18% of people living in Chicago are below the federal poverty line.